Okay, cool. I think we can get started. I'm going to go ahead and turn on my video. Hey everybody, I'm Fitz. I'm one of the co-founders of FreshPaint. This session is recorded, so we'll be sure to drop the link for anybody who did attend or did not attend afterwards. Just some housekeeping things. I've got the Q&A window open. Zoom has a Q&A function. So if you have questions during the session, we'll do Q&A at the end. So please drop your questions in as Eric and Samia and I are walking through what we have prepared for you today. And we'll make sure to get to those questions at the end. I know some of you submitted questions when you registered. I have those written down, and we'll make sure to cover those as well as part of the Q&A. Cool. Eric and Samia, are you guys ready to go?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's do some quick intros then. I will start. Again, I'm one of the co-founders of FreshPaint. FreshPaint is a customer data platform. We are the only HIPAA compliant customer data platform on the market today. And we've been really fortunate to work with some really great healthcare companies and digital health startups, Modern Health being one of them. Samia, I can pass it over to you to give yourself a quick intro.
Awesome. Yeah. Hey, I'm Samia Mathur. I lead the product analytics team here. I've been at Modern Health since the inception of the data team, and I'll pass it to Eric Bacon.
Hey, I'm Eric. I'm an engineering manager here at Modern Health. I kind of lead all things data within our tech org. So that's data science, data analytics, and data engineering.
Cool. And it doesn't look like the Modern Health crew can turn on their video. That's okay. Cool. So just a quick, hey, this is sponsored by FreshPaint. So I'll give you guys, seriously, I'll limit this to 2 or 3 minutes. Just a quick plug on what FreshPaint is. First of all, what is a CDP? CDP is a customer data platform. And basically what this means is a customer data platform collects data from your site, your app, your internal systems, centralizes it into one place, organizes it, and then you're able to push that data out to all the systems that consume customer data. So this is your product analytics tools like Amplitude and Mixpanel, your CRM, Salesforce, HubSpot, Lead Squared, your email and messaging systems like Iterable, Braze, Customer IO, things like that, your data warehouse and your BI tools, your advertising tools. All of these tools use customer data just in different formats. So you can integrate 8 different tools, 8 different ways, or you can integrate just one thing, FreshPaint, and be able to turn on tools really easily. It's a centralized place to organize your customer data. So that's basically what a customer data platform is. It's a little bit different in healthcare land because you have HIPAA, and HIPAA, as we all know, are really stringent laws on how we use, manage, and maintain sensitive customer data like PHI. And so what FreshPaint has built is not only are we HIPAA compliant, but we have a bunch of HIPAA specific functionality to help you control not just what customer data goes where across your stack, but also control and manage PHI across your stack. And so I'll just do a deep dive into 2 really quick features, and I'm going to just skip ahead really quickly. One is what we call ID masking. So not only can we integrate all your tools really easily in like just one click and things like that, but let's say you have tools that are not HIPAA compliant, or you don't want to share PHI to a specific tool. What we can do is we can hash user IDs, and this meets the government's criteria for what's called de-identifying PHI. And so you can share in your product analytics tool, for example, if you use Amplitude or Mixpanel, you're able to share data with that tool and get all the functionality out of it. So all the identity resolution, the user level granularity, you can group by certain properties, whatever you want. You could slice and dice your data however you want, but you're able to use that tool in a HIPAA compliant way without maybe paying extra for a BAA, or maybe just limiting your security footprint so that you're not sharing data with that third party. And then another feature I'll just deep dive into is what we call enforced allow lists. So this is in FreshPaint, you designate destinations that are HIPAA compliant and then destinations that are not HIPAA compliant. So safe and not safe destinations. Now for safe destinations, like maybe your data warehouse or something, that should be HIPAA compliant. You can send all the PHI you want there. You actually probably want PHI there, maybe your CRM or something like that. For the destinations that are not safe, meaning they're not HIPAA compliant, what we see most of the time where most HIPAA violations happen is in the metadata. So let's say, take this example, you have an event, a patient booked an appointment. And engineers may be setting that event up, and that event on its face doesn't have just the fact that somebody booked an appointment is not PHI. But what could be PHI is the metadata in that event. So maybe the appointment date, the medical record number, the patient name or address or something like that, their zip code. And so you may want this event to go to a not safe destination, a destination where you do not have a BAA in place, but you don't want that PHI and the metadata to go there. And so what we do is we have an allow list feature where you set up, it basically takes an allow list approach, meaning we'll only let through the specific metadata, the user properties and event properties that you specify ahead of time, and we'll automatically block anything else that comes through. And so the cool thing is we'll still send the event and the payload with the event. We'll just strip out all the sensitive PHI that you do not want, don't want there. So let's see. I think I might be able to turn on Modern Health Crew's video. Okay, Sami, I think I'm able to turn on your video now. There they are. Hello.
Hi. Can you hear us okay?
Yes, we can hear you perfect. Cool. So that's just a quick overview of FreshPaint and what we had prepared for you. We can pass it over to the Modern Health crew if you guys want to share your slides. And
Awesome.
Cool. There we go. There we go. This should be set up, right?
yes, it looks perfect.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us. We're going to kind of talk through like what we've been up to at Modern Health, building out the data team, kind of building out our data stack. As somebody said, she's kind of been here from day one. I joined earlier this year and kind of overseeing a lot of the data engineering sorts of things. So, we're going to kind of start off by just talking through like what is Modern Health. The sort of one-liner we like to share is Modern Health is a global comprehensive mental health care platform built on evidence-based principles, offering therapy, coaching, and digital content, all accessible in one app. And kind of what's unique about Modern Health is we're sold through employers, so we're a benefit that a HR business partner would buy alongside fertility and financial wellness benefits. And then our actual users are the employees who will sign up for the app and access therapy and care. So we'll kind of talk a little bit about data at Modern Health. The data team at Modern Health is pretty small. We're about less than a dozen people today, and kind of broke it up into these 4 pillars. So somebody leads product analytics, which is kind of the group that's responsible for trying to understand metrics and building dashboards to support product decision makers. We also own client reporting analytics. So we're not just building dashboards and sort of metrics for internal stakeholders, but also the HR business partners who buy Modern Health want to understand like how are the employees engaging with the product? What are metrics for understanding the overall health of the business? How does that compare to their competitors? That's like an important product that we own. And we also own the data engineering that sort of powers not just the platforms and infrastructure for the sort of 3 or 5 data folks on this team, but the business operations folks, the financial team, the clinical research team that we have, all kind of is built on top of our sort of core data infrastructure. Finally, we have this data products team, which is trying to build not just sort of insights into our data and the activity in our platform, but actually build ML-powered products on top of that stack. So kind of what we'll run through today in the next 20 minutes or so is kind of an overview of analytics at Modern Health, sort of how we think about questions that we face as a HIPAA business, sort of the data stack that powers that, and then dive a little bit deeper into this client reporting product and sort of how we are able to share that data with employers in a privacy preserving manner. So I'll let Soumya kind of take it for analytics.
All right, so let's get started here. Data analytics, like when we started out, we mostly had what we're calling transactional data. So the back end of the app has a database. We were able to query that database to try to come up with some insights. As you can imagine, that's fairly limited, but it does give you the ability to talk about volume, and it gives you the ability to like verify things that you think could be going wrong, or just to check what is going on. But you can get pretty far with volume. Like you can find out how many people, scheduled a session, how many people completed a session. And those are the sorts of questions we were getting asked by our product partners. Then we started to get more sophisticated, and this is where event tracking comes in. We want to think about like, how long does it take between, someone starting registration and ending registration? Are there parts of the funnel that people are falling out? Are there things that are difficult for users to understand? And all of that we're solving with FreshPaint, where we're capturing client-side analytics. And there's actually a lot more that we're doing with FreshPaint as well, including tracking A/B testing. We are capturing some server-side events as well. If we're now trying to add customization and like personalization to the app, and we're hitting an API to do that. And that API, when it returns results, we're capturing that in FreshPaint as well. So there's like a lot that we're using FreshPaint for, and this is a pretty powerful tool that like gives you a lot more insight into how members are interacting with the product. And then finally, integrating third-party data like Zendesk, Salesforce, CleverTap, NetSuite. These are all products that kind of teams that sit beside us use heavily for their workflows, and definitely affect the way that members see Modern Health and what their experience is like. So this kind of gives us the end-to-end experience and efficacy that we're looking for, and definitely helps our ops partners like marketing those stakeholders.
Cool. I'll kind of run through what is the actual platform infrastructure that we've built out over the last year and a half or so at Modern Health to kind of support not just those product analytics, but like Soumya said, business, finance, revenue, sort of all these other teams that are interested in understanding kind of the health of our business. This is kind of the smorgasbord of logos that we use here at Modern Health in the data industry, and I'll kind of walk through this from left to right. This is pretty similar to the diagram that Fitz had earlier. But I'll start on the left side. It's mostly our data sources. So as Soumya said, we have a Postgres database that's kind of our backend infrastructure. We have Salesforce data coming in about our customers. We have FreshPaint data coming in, CSVs that are manually uploaded, whether that's a report that someone ran, a download from some third-party tool or something. But then all in all, we have a bunch of other integrations that are maybe 20 or so different data sources. And the way we get that into our main data warehouse, which today is a big Postgres instance, is one through using Lambdas. So oftentimes, hey, we have like a integration with a third party that has some custom API. It's like some company you've never heard of before. So we have a data engineer go off and build a Lambda function that extracts that data and puts it into our warehouse. But more and more, a lot of our integrations are using this tool called Fivetran, which has like been a pretty big boon to our data engineering productivity. They're willing to sign a BAA. It's not that expensive relative to the cost of an engineer. And they allow you to, one, connect directly to APIs like Salesforce and Zendesk, or two, be able to upload CSVs. And so we end up actually building out kind of a data lake of CSVs and S3 buckets with our custom Lambdas, and then kind of use Fivetran as that ingest layer from that data lake into our warehouse. Once things are in Postgres, we're using dbt. It's kind of like the go-to tool here for this sort of stuff. So analysts will write queries. They'll go into our data transformation repo, and then we'll build sort of the DAG that, it shows like here, given all our raw events, how that turns into transform tables and how that gets prepared into actual data products that eventually get consumed by today two main consumers. One is Looker. That's what we use as our BI tool. Is we use that for internal analytics, but also for our external reporting product. And also scikit-learn here is kind of the fill-in for all the machine learning services that we're building. So those will typically be, a model that's put in S3 that's loaded up at runtime and serves some requests. But all of that data is trained using our data warehouse. So we have jobs that'll make sure that runs on schedule. As far as how we think about the responsibilities on the team, we kind of see the extraction layer of our infrastructure as kind of core data engineering, building API integrations, making sure that the servers are running, making sure the job is run on time. And then we see sort of the actual delivery of dashboards and analytics and machine learning services as core to the data science and analytics teams. Kind of what the intersection here is this, the actual data warehouse and the transformations. So we see that data engineering's responsibility is are those services up? Are they running on time? And then we look to analytics to kind of own, are those returning the correct results? Did we write our queries correctly? And we'll talk a little bit more about the model later on. But I kind of want to talk through just the story to get here. Modern Health is a Series D company with a 12-person data team, but we weren't always that way. And so I think different companies along their journey, especially early on the growth stage, don't need all of that infrastructure, especially with a pretty lean team. So I'll kind of talk through what it took to get there. In the beginning, there were just raw queries against our product database. So people were running SQL commands or running things in Django backend, and then able to put that into Python or into Excel and kind of graph that out. And that works just fine, with half a dozen people in a room. But at some point that starts to overload your server. There's no reason to take down the prod DB with a big SQL query. So you start making a read replica. And at this point in time, Postgres continues to kind of work just fine for us. We just had a read replica set up specifically for analytics. We weren't doing anything too fancy. The next thing is obviously copy pasting stuff into Excel and graphing it manually and sharing it with the team gets pretty old. So Looker was kind of the next big purchase for us, making sure we were able to actually build a platform where we could run queries, run explorers interactively, and have dashboards that sort of the key leadership team can look at regularly. The next phase in the process is kind of recognizing that all the data in our backend database was kind of built by engineers in a normalized form in a very standard way, but it's not really built for reporting. When you're building for reporting, you want very large tables that have joined and aggregated a bunch of data. And so for us, the big decision was, what do we want to do for a data warehouse? Do we want to go look at a BigQuery or a Snowflake or Redshift or something? But kind of one of the mantras that's kind of got us to where we are today is just using the tools that we know and gradually adding complexity. There's no reason really for us to kind of invest in a big contract with a big new technology early on in our life cycle. So we found that Postgres worked just fine as a data warehouse. In fact, up till today has kind of been pretty reasonable. With this as well, we also kind of recognize that we need a new system for building this transform layer. We were thinking, should we use dbt or some larger software? Ended up just going with pretty simple Lambdas, kind of rolled our own system of taking queries that analysts were writing in SQL files and getting that to run on scheduled Lambdas. And that worked just fine for early on. The next layer of complexity this summer was adding in all these third-party data sources. So Salesforce, CSVs, multiple different Postgres databases across the different services. And this is really where we started to take a look at not just rolling our own, but actually bringing in more managed services. So Fivetran was the first sort of third-party part of our data infrastructure. And that's been a huge boon to our productivity. Again, they have a lot of off-the-shelf APIs for Salesforce and Zendesk and stuff like that. And also it makes it really easy to write Lambdas that just dump out from a third-party data source into a CSV, and they're able to extract that on a regular basis. They handle merge conflicts or changes pretty readily, and we've been pretty happy with that as a sort of force multiplier for the data eng team. From there, we also started to build up more use cases on top of the data warehouse. So not just analytics, but also machine learning. Like I mentioned earlier, it's a pretty small, straightforward setup. Some organizations might use SageMaker or bigger MLflow platforms. We've just kind of rolled our own, and we're pretty happy with the sort of the simplicity that comes with starting with a pretty limited sort of feature set. From there, we added in FreshPaint, like Soumya said. FreshPaint's kind of breaks this trend because they actually have a managed warehouse solution. We actually don't have to run through Fivetran or have custom Lambdas. They just plug directly into our warehouse, and that's pretty nice. And then the final step of what we've built out to today is adding in dbt. So one big decision here for us was trying to figure out, do we want to host dbt ourselves and just run that in an ECS task on a regular cadence? or do we want to use DBT Cloud? And like, our initial intuition was to use DBT Cloud and more managed services with companies that are either willing to sign a BAA and are SOC 2 compliant, or don't need to touch all of our customer data. It's a pretty compelling value prop, but we knew that there was just a lot more other stuff that we wanted to build out within data engineering about running jobs, running these extraction tasks, running more machine learning training jobs. And so we knew that we wanted to build out a sort of a broader job orchestration system this fall. So I decided to stick with DBT Core. We have some regrets about that over the last 5 or 6 months. It's been some headaches versus having a more managed solution, but overall it's been okay. I'll kind of touch briefly on sort of what's next for us. The first big piece of infrastructure that we're currently swapping out is going from Postgres to Snowflake. So Postgres has lasted us up to about a 500 gig instance and a reasonable size sort of compute unit on RDS. But we're at the point now where we have, I think, nearly 1,000 tables, and we're running like a couple hundred jobs every hour just to sort of process our data in as close to real time as we need. And some of the indexes that we're building across like tables with tens or hundreds of millions of rows are just kind of getting out of hand. So Snowflake is finally going to make sense for us, but we really pushed it out by about 1.5 years or 2 years since starting this project before it kind of made sense for us to make that investment. The second bit is moving from Lambdas to ECS tasks. There's kind of 2 reasons for this. Lambdas are great, super lightweight to set up, but they only last 15 minutes. And so some of our data extraction jobs are taking longer than that. And also the rest of our infrastructure here at Modern Health is ECS containers on top of Fargate. And so it made a lot of sense for us to reuse the same Terraform and sort of base layers that those other teams use. A third aspect here is we're introducing a new tool called Prefect for a sort of orchestration layer. There's a lot of other sources or solutions out there, like your Airflows and your Dagsters and stuff like that. We recently kind of took a look at the market and found that Prefect was probably the right solution for us. From a HIPAA compliance perspective, kind of the most interesting aspect is Prefect is a managed solution. So they have a sort of their cloud servers that run a management plane where you have a web interface where you can go in and administer jobs, take a look at logs, stuff like that. But that managed solution doesn't have access to any of your customer data. There's a smaller data plane that's embedded within our VPC that has access to like kicking off jobs and marshaling data around. But there's a very limited amount of metadata that gets shared back and forth between that and sort of phoning home. So we end up with this hybrid solution that gets kind of the best of both worlds, the flexibility and the visibility of having a sort of SaaS product with a web dashboard, but also like minimizing the amount of customer data that's exposed to that provider. And then the last thing, here is we've gone ahead and started to have more reverse ETL systems. So more and more of our customers within the company are interested in not just looking at reports and stuff inside of Looker, but they want data like where they're actively using it. So customer success managers want to see data in Gainsight, and revenue teams want to see data in Salesforce. And today we're doing a lot of that with ECS tasks, just sort of manually marshaling data around. But like Fitz mentioned earlier, like FreshPaint is kind of becoming a bigger player in this space. And so we're really excited as FreshPaint's building more integrations to move more of our sort of our plans from saying, hey, we're going to sit down as an Eng team and spend 2 weeks building out an integration with an ECS task to being able to just wire that up with inside of FreshPaint. So I'll kind of wrap up real quick with sort of lessons learned along the way here. First thing here is like adding complexity gradually. We found that using what we know, like Postgres and Lambdas, has worked pretty well. Postgres, I will say, scales better than you think. If you have doubts about that, go talk to Malice at FreshPaint. He's scaled a Postgres to like petabyte scale clusters, and so it works pretty well. Again, it's not the perfect tool for any one job, but it's a pretty good all-rounder. And also, yeah, there's no need to add in super complex providers or tools early on, like all the other tools that we've kind of used with a strong data engineering team kind of get you there. The second thing here is we talked a lot about sort of the tech stack, but there's a lot more that goes into making this team and this sort of product successful. Like clear interfaces, both on the tech and the people side, we found have been really important. So on the tech side of things, using reusable modules, whether that's in Python land, in SQL land, or in Terraform land. Documenting your schemas, having a very clear sense of how data flows from sort of raw event schemas to transform tables into like prepared data products, and also having contribution guidelines. We support about 20 or so people actively contributing to our data transformation repo on any given week, not just data engineers, but data analysts, revenue people, ops people, and having contribution guidelines is key to making sure that things don't get out of hand there. On the people side of things, one of the early investments we made as a data eng team was setting up on-call and incident response. Those are super key, not just for making sure that there's clarity on, hey, if something goes down or a query's not running, who to talk to and when and how, but also there's a lot of other inbound stuff like, hey, my permissions aren't set up properly, or I'm having trouble accessing the database, or my query is running slow. How can I get help? And having that in a centralized place has been pretty key from the people side. And also more generally as a data team, our job is more or less to like respond to inbound requests, whether that's like in the moment or like over the course of a quarter. People want to know access to, how is this customer doing? I have a QBR coming up. Like what can we tell the customer about how they're performing? And having a sprint planning process and having just generally ticketing solutions and SLAs around that has been pretty key to our team's ability to scale. The third thing here is that full stack contributors are worth their weight in gold. Like I showed earlier, like there's a lot of surface area for both our data eng and our analyst teams. And so having data eng teams that can own their own infra and don't just aren't kind of beholden to other teams and kind of have that depth of knowledge really enables us to move quickly as we spin up stuff like Kinesis streams or new sorts of like S3 use cases that other teams aren't building. And also data analysts writing their own queries. Not every team has analysts writing queries. Some teams will have data engineers that are preparing the data sets for analysts to dashboard or dive into. But we found that actually treating our data eng team as more of a platform team and then having analysts self-serve the data that they need has been pretty great for being able to have us sort of have that loose coupling that allows those teams to operate independently. And finally, privacy and security is always a compromise. I mean, obviously in a regulated industry, there's a baseline expectation around sort of privacy and security. So by all means, like we can't compromise on those aspects, but within sort of our data realm, like Fitz was mentioning kind of earlier, some of our sources and some of our data is super PHI, like we need to really be thoughtful about HIPAA compliance. We'll in fact encrypt some of our data at rest. This is like health plan information or notes with a therapist. But other fields aren't really PHI or PEI and can be easily viewed by anyone in the org. This is sometimes data around engagement or revenue or other things that are part of our sort of North Star metrics. And as we think about building technology, like DIYing things using open source, like has the smallest surface area, you can keep things within your VPC. If you have a strong relationship with your security team, you can have eyeballs on that sort of stuff. But managed solutions are almost always worth it, we found, especially with providers that have SOC 2 compliance and sort of pass your vendor security questionnaire and are willing to sign a BAA. Engineering hours at a growth stage company are by far the scarcest resource you have, and anything you can do to spend thousands or tens of thousands of dollars to save weeks of bench time is generally worth it. And the final thing here is we've come to appreciate this sort of hybrid model of software like Prefect and other providers out there, where you have a sort of SaaS hosted management plane, but an embedded control plane or embedded data plane that kind of gets you the best of both worlds. And we're excited about more and more providers kind of building up that sort of solution in the space. So that's my sort of overview of our data platform. I'll pass it back to Somya to kind of talk about client reporting.
Let's look in the chat real quick. Okay, all right. Cool. Okay, so client reporting. I wanted to talk about this because I think it's an interesting use case. This is what we wanted to build. So what is client reporting? As you know, Modern Health is a solution where we have contracts with employers who provide Modern Health as a mental health benefit to their employees. And our sales team and like CS team, the customer success team, wants to be able to show the efficacy of our product to their HR partners who are kind of promoting this solution internally. And we want to be able to show that with data. And so we built we wanted to build this dashboard and then this like on-demand reporting. So something that they would be able to see and like use as evidence for like continuing the Modern Health benefit. This is an actual screenshot of what like one of the versions of this report looked like. And this like red, green, and yellow is actually like representing the members who scored like in the red, yellow, and green in their assessment, in their like, mental health assessment on onboarding. And as you can imagine, like that is PHI. Like if we were to show, which member scored red, that would be that is PHI. So we needed to be really, really careful about how we stored this data and like managed this product. So first thing we did was keep like a separate schema for external data, like and only give permissions to that schema. And we pre-aggregated this data. So there's no member level data in the schema at all, just for extra caution. This is what I mean by a pre-aggregated table. Like this is something where, you're counting things at the company level. So we don't show any counts or like don't show anything at the member level and then aggregate it in the report like you would usually internally. But with that, we get this problem where you can't filter reporting, right, without showing that, like member level data. So if we wanted to, like lots of clients ask questions like, how are my Tokyo employees doing versus my New York employees? And unless we wanted to take those kinds of inbounds and like, constantly be churning out like filtered versions of these reports, we needed to find a solution where that could be self-serve. And the answer we found was UDFs, which is kind of an interesting, it was like, I think kind of a clever solution. We basically built these little functions where the input to the function is something like a predefined set of filters, and the output is a table with the aggregated metrics. So just like what we did with these pre-aggregated tables, now we can provide filters as an input and kind of be able to show the same thing. Okay, I think that's all we have for you today. Ready to answer questions if you have any.
Yeah, we got some questions while you guys were presenting. I think this was a question for me. Is FreshPaint compliant with GDPR, DVG, NHS, or other country-specific regulations? Yeah, that stuff is table stakes for not just our healthcare customers, but our core business as well. So that's an easy one. We had a question from somebody, I think, Eric, while you were talking about the stack. Do you use an EHR for your virtual care? Where does that data funnel to?
We don't use an EHR. We just kind of have everything inside of our like internal infrastructure. What we have done with some stuff as far as it goes to like health plans and health insurance stuff is actually isolating that infrastructure, having a different set of keys. A lot of that data is encrypted at rest. But we don't really use any third-party providers for sort of the core data set. It's all kind of managed by our backend infrastructure teams.
Cool. We have another question that came through live. This is awesome. Love seeing the progression of your stack. Curious, have you considered a more focused reverse ETL tool to push insights back to your DBT models in Postgres or Snowflake, back into the SaaS tools your business teams use like Salesforce, Zendesk, et cetera?
Yeah, so we haven't really started building that much around this use case yet. We've had like one inbound, or we've had a couple of inbounds, but we've only built out one integration so far. There are tools out there like Census and stuff like that that I don't know the HIPAA compliance of. We haven't really done a deep dive into the space. So far today, we've just sort of recognized that this is a need and are starting to look at providers, whether that's our data team or whether that's FreshPaint. Fitz, maybe you have a better sense of what else is kind of out there in that reverse ETL space.
Yeah, I know there's like, well, all the companies are young. It is kind of the thing. So it's I'm not sure like what every company's security footprint is in terms of like HIPAA compliance. It's an area that FreshPaint is building out, I know, and I know that we are HIPAA compliance. I started a company, so I know those things. The area is so new that I have not really been able to keep up. And I assume at some point all these companies will, or a subset of them will be willing to sign BAAs and have some really good functionality of controlling PHI, but I'm not sure that anybody's there yet. And I know when people signed up, so we had a bunch of people sign up that in the notes when they signed up, they said, hey, I can't make it, but I'm going to watch the recording. So some things that we had from the audience ahead of time. At what point should one opt for a customer data platform? I'm hearing conflicting messages from different departments. And then we also had a second question that's basically the same thing. I'm curious what the tipping point is for adding a customer data platform versus just directly integrating in terms of destinations. So maybe you guys can, you guys just went through this a few months ago, so you have a good view of it.
Yeah, I think for us, like we're in a space where because Modern Health is purchased by employers and then like employees sign up, we're not actually marketing out to folks like having Facebook pixels or Google ads or any sort of tracking. And so we've been in a case where like really the only consumer of our data is our internal data warehouse and internal analytics. And so for us, it made sense to defer on that for a while as we were able to just like have our data eng team build integrations to go to the single funnel. However, if you were in a situation where you had lots of other places where you wanted to multiplex your data too. Like if you did have ad campaigns or targeting, or if you're using a product analytics tool where you, especially if it wasn't HIPAA compliant, that would make a lot more sense to integrate your CDP earlier. We're now kind of at that point where maybe a little late to the game where we're looking at, hey, should we have a separate product analytics tool like an Amplitude on top of Looker? Should we be thinking about other places where we're trying to export data? And now like this is the time where having a CDP is making a lot of sense, but we just kind of, because of the path dependence of our company, haven't had a need for that so far. Fitz, I don't know if you want to add more to that.
I think it'd be interesting for the crowd to hear, like, what were your thoughts if you were just concerned about tracking behavior on the site in your apps and things like that and getting it in your warehouse. If you're just concerned about that initially, why not just do that yourself or go with something like open source self-hosted? Why did you end up layering in FreshPaint to start?
Yeah, right. I mean, for us, the main thing is just saving eng hours more than anything else. Like, again, eng hours are the scarce resource. Like as a small or a growth stage company, like speed is how you win. And so we considered, for experimentation, for tracking a bunch of stuff, like what would it look like to have an engineering team, like think about that, build that out, integrate that across all of our properties, web, iOS, Android, et cetera. And then, think about, hey, we're going to have this big effort to track all the things we care about. I'd previously used tools like FreshPaint in the past that not just did sort of like manual precision event tracking, but also auto tracking, and found those to be a pretty key tool. So the fact that we could sort of drop FreshPaint in and just sort of see them auto track all of our clicks, views, input field changes, et cetera, and be able to layer on top of that where we need more information, that like was an obvious sell to us. So that combined with the sort of ability to multiplex data in and around our services, like kind of made them a great solution for us at that point in time. But yeah, there are actually more and more open source versions of things. You can roll your own, or you can sort of set up, I forget the name of a couple, but there've been a couple of YC companies that are like, hey, we're an open source version of Segment or X or Y or Z that you can self-host. And those might be a valuable intermediate service if like you're in a situation where like cache is tight and engineering hours are more available. But for us, it didn't make sense.
We have another question live from Matt here. Curious why you've held off from Amplitude, Mixpanel Heap, basically a dedicated product analytics tool for so long.
Yeah, honestly, we don't have like a great answer to that. It's mostly the fact that we've like built out Looker and kind of like Somio was kind of here from day one, sort of building on top of Looker. And that came out of a need for especially external reporting. Like we needed a product where we could have dashboards and insights available to like these third parties. And so up till now, we've been like very okay building on top of Looker, and it's actually quite great for a lot of the ops and revenue teams. But for product analytics, it's not nearly as focused of a tool. So that's definitely something we're looking to. It wasn't nearly as intentional as maybe this makes it seem. I know that in I think Fitz, you had a blog post that was like, here's the stack on day one, and having like a Mixpanel or Amplitude. I think Amplitude will sign a BA, but Mixpanel won't. Is that right? But like keeping that in mind as well, as we've kind of like only tried to add complexity as there's been like a dedicated need for it.
Yeah. What we've seen with our healthcare customers, both companies will sign a BAA. We have some customers who questioned the validity of that BAA. And I think the other thing to note for the audience is what we've seen is Mixpanel tends to be a bit more price friendly. To sign a BAA with Amplitude, they push you onto their enterprise plan, and it costs in some cases the price of a dedicated hire per year. It's like over 60, 70K a year just to get on a BAA, just regardless of your data volume. So before you go too far, we actually have a webinar next week. I'll share it in a few minutes, but this is the subject of that webinar next week. One thing that I would like to add from my point of view, from an external point of view for Modern Health, is you guys have like a huge data team. I think that you guys as a company invested in your like data team early on, as opposed to investing in tools that maybe product managers could use in a self-serve way. And the data team serves like, I think it's like a dozen or 15 or so people in product, and then a bunch of other orgs as well. So I think it's just like you chose that path as a company, as opposed to like, hey, let's buy this tool. And so like PMs can like self-serve, get what they need. One of the last questions that came through ahead of the session, how do you manage to comply with data privacy regulations?
Yeah, so GDPR is like top of mind for us. The main things we think about is, and like, also HIPAA stuff, obviously. One, having a strong security and compliance team. So they give us a lot of feedback on sort of how we should be hosting our infrastructure, like where we need to think about issues around data governance. As far as sub processors go, just like having BAs signed in place as part of those early conversations, checking like, hey, are you going to be able to support GDPR and data residency requirements that we have? On our team, we mostly looked to guidance from our existing infrastructure and security engineers on like how we set up our VPCs and stuff like that. So as a data team, we actually haven't had to think like super in depth about this. We've fortunately had other people to give us feedback, but also having feedback from our vendors as well, and making sure that they're compliant is pretty key. You're on mute.
Yeah, I was on mute. This is another question. It's basically same thing, but related. What was your experience looking at vendors' ability to comply with HIPAA and sign BAAs and things like that?
Yeah, in a regulated, I came from a non-regulated space in my last company, and a lot of the tools we were used to using like just didn't have support, or like, as part of their terms, they explicitly disallow like HIPAA information. And so that's fair. That's fine. So we found that there was a pretty limited space in a lot of tools, especially on the tracking side of things. So we're excited that like FreshPaint is one of the providers that's like willing to double down in this space. But we've actually found that a lot of the larger organizations like have just built this in. Like they're working with not just HIPAA compliant customers, but customers who need to comply with PCI and a bunch of other regulations. So your Snowflakes, your Googles, your Lookers and stuff are all very willing to sign BAAs. It's only really at these like smaller to medium-sized orgs where they've kind of like they haven't built up the compliance function. Even stuff like Fivetran, right? Very willing to sign a BAA even for a mid 5-figure contract. But yeah, something to like bring up in sometimes you can find this information on folks' websites or their terms of service, but like always something that an enterprise sales rep is happy to answer for you.
We're basically at time. Unless anybody has some last minute questions, I would like to just plug, I briefly teased this. Next week, same time, Wednesday, next week at 10 a.m. Pacific time, we're having another webinar with another healthcare customer, Osmind. They are an EHR for ketamine and psychiatry clinics. The topic is going to be product analytics from 0.1 to 1, handling the challenges of product analytics in healthcare. And we sort of touched on this, is like, when do you bring in a tool like Amplitude, Mixpanel, Heap? What are those vendors' security postures? Do they sign BAAs? Do they charge extra for a BAA? Is it even worthwhile for a smaller, medium-sized organization? So we'll talk to the head of product at Osmind, who basically just went through this whole process this spring and in the summer. And so hopefully, if anybody of you are in an evaluation period or planning to be next year or something like that, you're gearing up for this, hopefully he can help shortcut some stuff for you. So I will make sure to drop the link to this to anybody who signed up for this. It'll also be on our website. Sign up, same deal. If you can't make it, sign up anyways. We'll share the recording. It'll be a YouTube video. We'll upload this probably tomorrow or something like that. So it'll be available on demand. Even if you can't make it, sign up. And I don't see any other questions or anything in the chat. So thank you so much, Samya and Eric. It was really great to have you, and it was fun to do this. We should do it again.
Yeah, thanks, folks, and appreciate the questions as well. Yeah, super important stuff. Really excited about this upcoming webinar series.
Okay, cool. Okay, cheers. Bye, everybody.